So in this section, we're going to make differentiation a little bit harder. And we're going to introduce the product rule. And we're going to introduce the quotient rule. So product is the answer to a multiplication problem, and quotient is the answer to a division problem. So bottom line is this. I could write it, and I'm going to go ahead and write it the scary way. If I have two functions being multiplied together, then a shortcut way for the product rule is going to be to take the first, which is f of x, times the derivative of the second, plus the second times the derivative of the first. But that's really kind of messy. So here's what I write. The first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. So in this case, that's your first and that's your second. Okay, quotient rule is going to be kind of scary too. So if I've got f of x over g of x, and I want to take its derivative, then what I'll do is I'll take the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom all over the bottom squared. Okay, so I would rather say if this is the bottom and this is the top, then I've got the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom all over the bottom squared. Okay, so if you're a visual person, you're going to start here and write this down times this thing's derivative. Plus, start here, write it down, times that thing derivative. So here times this derivative plus here times this derivative. Okay, if you're a visual person, go in a circle. Start here, times this thing's derivative, minus, start here, times this thing's derivative, so you go in a circle, all over the square of the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to go back and forth as far as what is product rule, what is quotient rule, and how we can get through this mess. Knowing when to use it, knowing when not to use it. Okay, so I'm going to give you one example of each. So we have, if my function is, and I have, let's think, I'm making this up, x to the 7th plus 6x squared times 3x to the 4th minus 9x to the 3rd plus 2x, well, we'll just do plus 2x because that's where I wrote the parentheses. Okay, so here's the deal. I've got this chunk times this chunk, and they both have variables in them. So my bigger picture is I've got variables times variables. So I can either use algebra and multiply this whole thing out, which means x to the 7th times these three terms, and then 6x squared times these three terms. See if there's anything alike, combine it, do whatever. Or I can say all of that is too difficult. So I've got this first chunk, and I've got this second chunk. Okay, so what I have is the first. So I'm just going to write it down. X to the 7th plus 6x squared. Okay, so the first times the derivative of the second. So the derivative of the purple stuff is going to be a 12x cubed minus 27x squared plus 2. Okay, so I got first times the derivative of the second plus the second, which I'm going to run out of room. So 3x to the 4th minus 9x to the 3rd plus 2x times the derivative of the first. So the derivative of the first is a 7x to the 6th plus a 12x. Okay, so first times derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. What happens if we change that into a division problem? Okay, so again, I'm just making stuff up because I can. So I've got an x to the 7th plus a 6x squared over 3x to the 4th minus 9x to the 3rd plus 2x. So I'm just using the same two functions as I had before. So this is going to be the top, and this is going to be the bottom. Okay, so how do I start writing this thing out? I've got the bottom. So just write out the bottom. So I have a 3x to the 4th minus a 9x to the 3rd plus a 2x. So bottom times the derivative of the top. So the derivative of your numerator is 7x to the 6th plus 12x. Minus the top, which is still blue, x to the 7 plus 6x squared, times the derivative of the bottom, so this thing's derivative, which is 12x to the 3rd minus 27x squared plus 2. And then that is all over the bottom, so rewrite your denominator squared. Okay, so that's our practice, and that's what we're going to be doing in section 3.2 is product rule and quotient rule.